Alright, this is a bit of a weird video, I guess. I didn't want to spend hours and hours on camera just trying to figure out some way of adding modability to the game. So I just did a bit of work off camera, and this is what I came up with. I looked into Lua script, which I've never actually done before. And there was one called Moonsharp, I think it was, for Unity. And so this is what I came up with. Some sort of system where I can have modules internally, and then later on I'll try and factor in the external ones as well. But yeah, to start off with, I've got just a base, and then I decided to add in some kind of hot and cold module like I described in the little file that I wrote up earlier. Inside the base, there are different files here. There's a dot module, which is just something I made up, which is just holds some metadata about what the module is. And then I've got components that it will add, and I've got entities that it will add. And in the hot and cold one, I've just got the components. Obviously not fully fleshed out, still a work in progress, but I thought it would be good to show you just what I've built so far with it. So you know what, let's go through the entity, well, the modules first. Because I've written it in Lua script, it seems like the what was this, Visual Studio doesn't seem to like the file. Maybe I can fix that, but I thought I may as well just load it up in VS Code instead. So here we go. This is the base.module. The name is base because this will be the base data for the game. I've got a version there that maybe that'll come in useful at some point. It might just be good to have that in there anyway. And then a sort order, because I would like to have some way of controlling what runs when. I don't want some expansion module running before the base module, because the expansion module might try and use something that should already be initialized from the base module, and then obviously that would cause an error. So I've got, here we go, components. This is all just fluff, doesn't need to be there. The only thing that matters are the actual code parts. But it's nice to keep it documented, I guess. So every time I add a component, I add it here. So yeah, I've just got a couple of test things at the moment. I've got add a component called hardness, and that will have some sort of gameplay effect. Got a health component that holds the current and maximum health. So anytime we want to perform damage or healing, I can just grab the entity, grab this component off of the entity, and then do something with the health. I've got a material component that just says this entity is a material. So that could be stuff like iron or human skin or even an insect shell. And these will have different components attached based on that. But I thought it would be nice to have just an overall catch-all component, so I can say if I need to get all the materials, then I can do that pretty easily. Or if I need to check if something has a material before I check for these different values, maybe I can do it with this. Or maybe instead of these values, I can just rip all this out again and add it all to the material. I'm not sure. Still a work in progress. And then in entities, I thought let's just start off by creating some heroes. I've taken local variables which store the component IDs that I'm working with, because you don't want magic strings all over the code. If this just said name, you know, you're going to have to repeat this so many times. Maybe you create a spelling error or whatever. It just makes more sense to put it in a variable and then just keep repeating that. Yeah, so say add a name component, then get that name component and change it to something. and then we add a health component, and then we get the health component and change the max and current. Obviously, they'll both be the same when you're actually, well, when I'm actually building the game properly, but I thought it's probably better to have them different so that I can test to make sure the correct values are coming back for the correct variable. And yeah, that's kind of all I've done for this. The hot and cold one just adds boiling point, freezing point, melting point, and a temperature. So to any entity, I can add a temperature component, and if I use a fireball spell, I can increase the temperature of anything caught in it. If I use a freezing spell, I can reduce the temperature, and then based on that, different effects can happen. Who knows? So back in the regular sort of C# code, I've got a static class module loader, and it creates the Lua script object. Oops. So I've got this method called Lua setup, and inside this I will create the object and assign it to the variable I have. I add a couple of global methods that I'm going to be using. One of them is create entity, which comes from the entity manager. Can't remember if I've showed that off or not. Got add component to entity, get component from entity, and also add component, because this just stores any components inside of the entity manager so we can load it later on and use it. Yeah, then we've got load modules, which is what will run first, and that runs the setup, and then that will grab the internal modules, and in here will also be load external modules, but that doesn't actually do anything right now. And then yeah, this is kind of all crazy. All this does is checks an internal module path and an external module path when it's added, grabs all of the directories inside a directory, and then checks for one of these .module files. If there's no .module file, then the directory is marked as just not being a mod, and it will move on. But if it does find it, then it will try and get the data out of the file, and then it will create a container for it. So it won't run the mod files immediately. It will add it to a container. And the reason we do that is because we have a sort order. I will sort the containers in order of sort order and then run through them and load them. So yeah, that's all we do is take the module marker file, take the directory path, store the module or the metadata, sort on the metadata for the sort order, and then run them. So yeah, that's kind of all it does. It just loads all Lua files inside the directory and will just perform them with do string. Now I'm very new to Lua script and stuff, so this is just code that I've been finding in documentation or online, people suggesting ways of doing things, and a little bit of my own ideas just for how to compact it all. Like the sort order and stuff was just something I came up with. So yeah, that's how the module runs, and we can see it here. If I just run it, it'll be a bit slow because I forgot to restart. Um, Loading modules, loading module base, and it spits out the version as well. And then it says loading components, loading entities, which are just the two files in here, components and entities. And then afterwards it loads hot and cold, and it does the same thing. And then I've just got it spitting out the current health and max health of that hero that I built. That's just debugging to make sure it works. So yeah, it's kind of all I've got at the moment. Let's see, I don't know if I showed off the entity manager or not, but this is just a dictionary and a component dictionary. I've decided just to have entity IDs as integers because this number can get quite high. That should be a lot of entities I can have in my game, and if not, I think I can maybe make it 64 somehow. I don't know. Um, yeah, I'm sure I could probably make this bigger if I need it to. So all it does is, it doesn't do anything. When I create an entity, it takes the ID, it will push the ID, well, it will push a dictionary of this dynamic value and string into the entity dictionary, but under the key of this new ID. I guess that should maybe be that just for safety reasons. And then we plus plus, which just means increment the value. So if this starts off at 0, it will become 1. And then we just return the ID, which is the new entity we've created. When we add a component, all we're doing is pushing in a component ID, which will be a string like health or a name or something. And then we set that to the dynamic value of the component. So interesting thing, we store essentially some kind of template, which, where have I got that? Maybe in here. So when we add a component, we're passing in anything that's in here, I think, becomes the template. So you can also have functions in here. I can't remember the syntax for it, but you can have some kind of function. And then that function will also be available as well as the value. But I want my components to just be data driven, so I'm going to try and keep all the logic out of it. So yeah, essentially you're just passing in something like this into this dictionary. So when we want to use that component, we use add component to entity, and this just checks to make sure the component exists. And then I guess we make sure the entity exists, and then we add an empty component to the entity. And then afterwards, we get the prototype, we run some Lewis script, which is to make a shallow copy of this template. And the instance that we create is what we add to the entity. So we don't add the template to the entity, we make a new instance of it and then add that to the entity. So that's how we can change the values within without it changing everywhere. And then, yeah, to get the component back out, all we do is pass back a dynamic value, which will be the template, and we just look for the entity ID and the component ID. Now, this probably needs a bit more locking down, but when I'm templating, or when I'm prototyping, I just want to get something working, and then afterwards I can easily go through this again and say, how can I make this more robust and more safe when it's actually running? So that's not too much of a problem right now. So what else? Yeah, we make a copy, get it. The way we actually use this dynamic value, we need to get, I think it's a table. Here we go. So in the initial game state, which is just some tester code, I print all heroes' health. So I'm going to look through all of the entities and then check if they have a health component, and then it will check the table and then get the value current and then get the value maximum. So let's have a look how this matches up with the code we have. Dynamic value of health component, and we will access current and maximum. Here is a health component and it has current and maximum. So when we do something like this and we create a dynamic value, it adds this value to a table and sets the value equal to that, adds this value to a table, sets the value equal to that. So all we need to do to get that back is access the table and do get. And I haven't tested it, but maybe it's something like table set. Yeah, there we go. So now if we want to set the health equals something else, we can just do maybe that? I don't know. Set current equal to dynamic value. So it might need a bit more. New uh, new number maybe. All right, so it might look like this. I would obviously check this before running it, but this is probably how we set a new value using this. You take the key from the table and set it equal to some number. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. This should allow us to have any number of additional components. So if someone wants to create a whole new system like this hot and cold, you know, if this didn't exist, the base game wouldn't have any temperature capabilities. We wouldn't know if something was too hot or too cold. But adding this whole module to the game suddenly allows us to have things like, is there a desert region in the game? If your character's heat continues to rise too high, we can add some kind of code to the game that says, if the heat is too high, you'll start taking damage, or who knows what, maybe your capabilities in battle are greatly reduced. And then similar for a frozen cave, unless you cast a spell that keeps your body temperature regulated, then you get too cold and you will die or something. So that's the whole point. I want to build a base game with a lot of stuff already in it from my brain that makes it fun, but then other people can say, I want to add all this to it. Maybe I only add 100 weapons and people think this game needs 5,000 weapons. Then I want the capabilities to be there. So yeah, that should be the end of this video. Just creating entities, creating components, using Lua script to handle all of that. And the next problem is probably trying to come up with a way to actually put that into a game, I guess. We can add any number of components and entities we want, but then we still need the shopkeepers to have those items in the game. We still need those hero entities to exist on the map somewhere. So I need to figure out how to do all that. But this is definitely a step in the right direction. So thanks for watching, and see where it goes.